Okay, so in this little exercise, we're going to look at how to do some more complex and high level sort of thinking for the computer. And this involves a term called sort of abstraction. So we make a lot of assumptions. So we sort of want to hide away the inner workings of our computer program. So, things we sort of take for granted, like being able to count numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got to tell the computer how to actually do that. Remember, it's thinking in binary zeros and ones. It doesn't really know what a 2 is. So it needs to have some way of working that out. Thankfully, behind the scenes, people have written a lot of code and interacted with the hardware to carry out those tasks. So if we wanted to count to 3, we could use a for loop. Start at 1, while we're less than or equal to 3, increment it and write out those numbers. So we've got a similar sort of like bit of vocab. So, and we're going to carry out some of these tasks. So it allows us an abstract way of carrying out sort of details and communicate these instructions. So we use sort of words over and over. And these are some of our keywords. If you might have a recipe or a set of instructions for cooking something, and you might bake a cake, or you've cooked a stir fry, or so on. And an abstraction, but we don't need to know all the details for how that recipe works. We just need to know we baked it, and then we use whichever recipe is appropriate. In programming, we use this idea called abstraction. It's linked in with the ideas of making a function. So we write something which carries out a bunch of code behind the scenes for us. It makes our programs easier to read, easier to understand, and once we've written this function once, we can use it over and over. It makes just things so much easier to understand. And high order functions that accept other functions as arguments and will return functions as output. Oh, that's really a bit sort of messy, but it becomes quite useful later on. So we're going to add code to a code to be able to run other code. So let's say we had a person, you might have a function for speaking, and you might have an English module, an English function which basically speaks in English. You might have a French function which speaks in French, and so on. So the more abstraction we have, the more modular and reusable our code becomes. But don't worry too much if this is a really sort of challenging sort of concept, because it is. It will take a long time to become sort of familiar with it, but it's going to get it to carry out tasks, and on the long term it will just become more and more useful. But it's more just about, at the moment, knowing that it exists and where it's being used, and maybe some other examples you might sort of see, so that as you become more confident, you'll be able to create your own and use ones that actually already exist. So we've got a really long function name, so it makes it quite hard to read. So const announce that I'm doing important work is a function, and it just prints out the message, I'm doing very important work. It is quite messy. I really don't like this sort of format for writing functions. It, in my opinion, just is quite messy. And it just makes it harder to sort of read. But that's because of my background. But if you're familiar with this, by all means use it. But bear in mind, it doesn't really look like what's in too many other programming languages. And we've got to pretending that this one does important work and needs to be run repeatedly. So it's going to be really annoying to call that function over and over. So what if we wanted to rename it without sacrificing the source code? We can reassign it, so give it another name. So we've got that original variable, and we're just going to give it a second variable name called busy. And so we can just write busy instead of having to write announce that I'm doing important work. So it's a way of actually just repurposing some of our code. And we assign it without the parentheses, so we're telling it just to reassign the function name. If we put the brackets, it would actually run the function and actually store the answer in there. So if we just want to reassign just the name, we just give the variable names, or the function names in this case, not the parentheses behind it. Okay, we've got different objects. Functions considered first class object, and doesn't actually relate to too many other languages, but it means we can actually assign different things to them and store other information and store values with the functions. It's more peculiarity with JavaScript, so don't rely on this for too many other languages. Each function has a property such as length and name and two strings, so it can convert it. So we've defined a function with a very long name. Check that 2 plus 2 equals 4 a million times. So it's going to do that using a for loop a million times and check it out. And if it doesn't get the right answer, it's going to print out an error message. Okay, so we're going to make a new shorter variable is 2p2. So we're going to have is 2p2, and I'm not going to retype that. I'm just going to copy it, because the easiest way to make mistakes is by typing in something wrong. And now we're going to run it, so invoke it is what it means when it says run it. And note, I now just give it the same arguments. And it's run it. So is there a way that we can actually print it? So we're going to use console.log to actually print it out. And we can see it actually ran because it hasn't actually printed out an answer. So 2 plus 2 is always going to be 4. It hasn't given us any errors. And is 2 plus 2 dot name. So we're going to get the name of that, and it prints out the name of that function, so what it is referring back to. And we can send functions as parameters, so as something that goes inside the brackets. So let's have a look. So some functions behave like any other type of data in JavaScript. It might not surprise you that we can also pass functions into other functions as parameters. A higher order function is a function that accepts functions as parameters, returns a function, or both. So if we run something, it's going to give us an answer back that we can then use. So if I had a function called add that took two numbers and added them together, I could actually, let's say, add, and it returns a value of 4, then it'll pass that value of 4 rather than the actual instruction. So we call the functions and they get carried out in order. So going from left to right. So let's have a look at this little example here. So we go up function runtime, it's under function parameter. So when it runs, sets the date to be now, and we have our function parameter. So if we time run function, so when it runs that, add 1 to 1, so it adds 1 onto it. So function parameter is basically just like when you create a function, the stuff that's inside the brackets. This is awful. I hate the way that they set out this code. It is really not nice. I do not like it. And so when it's got here, we've given it that function, which is this one here, and it goes off and runs that. And so adds 1 onto it. So add 1 to 1, 2, T2, stores that date, and then the current date minus the other one, but it's not really doing too much in here. So let's have a look at what we've got. Obviously you can change that and call it whatever you want it to be, and it will just change whatever's written down here. So we've written a higher order function, and this one here, print it out as equal to 10. It's going to count down to 0 and print out those. So it's doing a little timer to run it. Save variable, time p2, and assign its value. The result of invoking time run function. Okay. And then we're going to check with the 2 plus 2. So we're going to run this. So we're going to make a new variable called time 2 plus 2 is assigned to, and what function do we want to run? We want to run time func runtime. Okay, and we're going to tell it to run that function. Okay, probably is useful if I actually check my spelling. There we go, missed the C there. Okay, now it wants us to write our own higher order function. This function should have 2 parameters, a function and a value, and should call the argument function with the value 2 times. If the callback function produces the same result twice, it should return the result of the function call, otherwise it should return the string. This function returned inconsistent results. Okay, now we want a higher order function called check consistent output, and 2 parameters, function and a value. It should then call the argument 2 times and produce the same result twice, return the result, otherwise print an error message. Okay, I'm not going to use this format of typing. I'm going to use the traditional function call. So I want to have check consistent output. Now, this function takes 2 parameters. So I'm going to have one called function parameter and one called value parameter. Now I need to run that twice, and I'm going to need to do something with those 2 values. So I'm going to make a variable called first, and then run this function parameter. And give it the value parameter to it. And I want to do that twice, so I'm just going to do that as a second. Is it second value parameter? If I had lots more of these and I wanted to match them and check them, I could probably use a loop. But because I've just got 2, I'm just going to create 2 variables. If first is equal to second, then I want to just return that value. If they don't match, I've got an error message that I need to log. I need to return the string, which means when their function finishes, give this value back. This function returned inconsistent results. And if I run that, no, let's check our spelling on these. Check consistent output. Func param. Okay, let's try that. Fix up our spelling. Yep, just didn't have the right spelling there. And I'm going to invoke it with the add2 function. So we're going to tell it to actually go and run that. So I'm going to run check consistent output. With the add2 function, and 4 is the other function. And it goes off, sends that function actually to it. If I included the brackets there, it would actually run the add2 and just send it the number 2. So these are a really complex thing. I wouldn't worry about using them too much, but they're just good to know about.